This video is an introduction to genre theory, which will be one of the major theories we'll use throughout the course to help us understand how writing works, and especially in a technical setting. I subtitle it Understanding Technical and Scientific Writing because genre theory is one of those things that can really help you to understand the ways that technical and scientific writing might differ from other kinds of writing you've encountered, and also the rules that are at work and how to negotiate those rules. Before we jump into genre theory, I want to talk briefly about rhetoric. Some of this might be review for you, so just follow along and make sure that you understand what's going on. Rhetoric is one of those terms that often gets a little bit of a bad reputation. We hear a lot of talk in politics, for instance, about so-and-so's use of rhetoric, and often they mean negative things by that. In the context of this course, rhetoric is, as defined by Aristotle, the art of finding all of the available means of persuasion. And this can be how you use visuals, the words you use, the way you format a document. It can be any kind of feature, use of language, etc. And I want you to think about the ways that you have all of these tools available to you in order to attempt to persuade an audience. In technical and scientific settings, often we ignore the persuasive part of writing because we want to seem objective and not biased, yet that itself is a form of persuasion. In fact, I would argue that all language use or all kinds of communication are inherently rhetorical or inherently persuasive. So in order to think about persuasion, you have to always be thinking about audiences. And we'll talk a lot about audience throughout the semester. I'll have you talk to different kinds of audiences. You'll be writing for different audiences, and you'll be thinking about the ways that the writing you do will be targeted to different audiences. So you have these various audiences, and you want to accomplish your purpose, which is the why, and you have to use rhetoric. And the tools that you have available to you, those available means, are the strategies: ethos, pathos, and logos. These three strategies might be very familiar to you as a student. If you've taken Comp 1 and Comp 2, it's likely you've talked about these three things. So ethos would be your ethical appeal. And this doesn't mean the use of ethics, although ethics is very important in terms of persuasion, especially in technical settings. It means your character. So if you noticed in my intro video, I talked about how I study scientific communication. And as an ethical appeal, that was meant in some ways to, one, let you know a little bit about myself, but also to say, hey, you engineers and scientists who are taking this class, you can trust me. I understand what you need to know about writing in your particular academic discipline. So that's a form of asserting my character as a speaker. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Other things that make you credible as a speaker are using sources to support your ideas. You tell the writer, hey, I've done my research. I can be trusted as a speaker. This one often gets overlooked, but it's very important to consider as you go forward. Pathos is the emotional appeal. A lot of writers think that it doesn't have a place within technical communication. However, there are ways to incorporate pathos in technical settings that are appropriate and are professional. It's just that scientists often get suspicious when it's overly emotional or you're using too much of a rhetorical appeal in this way. I use the example of those really sad ASPCA commercials where Sarah McLachlan's talking and there's, the cute puppies and kittens that are like really sad looking. That's basically straight up pathos. It's meant to tug on your heartstrings. But that's not really appropriate for a technical setting, yet forms of pathos such as talking about impacts on users can tap into a reader's emotions and try to appeal to them in those ways. So I'll give you opportunities to think about and play around with these different appeals. The last one is likely the one you think most about when you think about technical communication, and it's logos, the logical appeal. And this is using facts, data, statistics, all of those good things to support your arguments in various ways, and one that you are most likely the most familiar with. All of these elements must come together to effectively convey your message or persuade your audience. So it's not just that you use only one appeal or you only do one thing. You have to interweave them. And this is what makes rhetoric pretty awesome, but also sometimes a little complicated to see what's going on. We'll be exploring these concepts throughout the semester. Now on to genre theory. So why genre? Genres what are they? Some people, when they hear genre, they think, oh, music, oh, movies, oh, books. You think of classification systems. And while that is one way that genre can work, I find it to be more dynamic and powerful to think of genre beyond just as a way of classifying forms of communication or art. Instead, we want to look at genre as ways that it enables action in a specific community. So I'm using Carolyn Miller's definitions here and really building on what we call the rhetorical genre theory. Again, some of you might have encountered this in Comp 1 or Comp 2, but I want to extend it and really have you think about genre in this more dynamic and powerful way. Genre theory examines how written or spoken genres enact social action within a specific community, and it combines 4 elements. It's essentially a formula. We have exigence, we have the audience, we have constraints, and we have purpose. All 4 of these things combine together to yield decisions about genre. Exigence is what is leading you to want to communicate. It's defined briefly as a need, a lack, or a want. So if you have to write to a professor to get them to give you an extension, there's something that's, before you get to the purpose, is nudging you to need to communicate this message to that audience member. So then you have who you're writing for, you have the constraints. So if we're talking about an email to a professor, there are rules in place. You should address them, dear Professor so-and-so, and move from there if you're trying to really get on their good side. And then the purpose, what it is you want to accomplish. All of these things factor together to decide what genre is most appropriate. An email in this case might be most appropriate. A poem is not going to be an appropriate genre to use to communicate your message. The other part of genre, in addition to it being very specific and tailored to these different needs, is that it's not private and it's not closed. So in this way, it's not just any kind of piece of writing. It has to be open, which means that it needs to be able to change. So the conventions for genres do change. The rules that are at work change often. Sometimes it's from the organization. The rules will switch. The users decide that something is more appropriate or works better. Or it's just a slow shift in the social structure. The other part is that it has to be public. It has to do something. It has to enact social action for it to be seen as a genre. So all of this means that something like a research paper is maybe not considered a genre because it's not necessarily doing anything. However, a report, if it's written to someone, it has particular rules about formatting, about content, about style. It has a targeted audience. It has a purpose that the writer is trying to accomplish, and that makes it a more of a genre, or at least a more actionable genre. And so we want to really focus here when we think about genre as what kind of writing will best enable me to do something? How will it make me act in certain kinds of ways? So we're starting off by looking at resumes, covers, letters, and memos, and we're going to explore what all 3 forms of those documents allow a writer to do in order to accomplish a purpose, which is essentially get an interview for a position. So here's the takeaway. Genre is essential to understanding how to participate in a community. All of this class is going to be targeted to looking at the ways that you should write as a professional in your community. And this can be your academic community as whatever major you are, or as a professional in the field, whatever your career goals are. Genres take a lot of different forms, and very rarely are they taught directly. So if you think about genres, you're like, okay, I'm going to go into a new setting, which means I need to learn what the primary genres are that they use and what the rules are to make them work. So these are two quotes that I want to leave you with from Carolyn Miller. First, she says, for the student, genres serve as keys to understanding how to participate in the actions of the community. And this is really essential to you as you explore your major. How do you show that you belong? And you do that through communication. You do that through the appropriate use of genres. The second piece is that she says, a genre is a rhetorical means for mediating private intentions and social exigence. It motivates by connecting the private with the public, the singular with the recurrent. And here she's talking about the ways that genres work to take something that's within you and is private and make it a public action. And also something that you might experience once and connect it with things that other people experience over and over again. And this is where genres form, is when the same situation occurs over and over again and people respond in similar ways. And so that's how a genre comes into being. And there's a little reference. So I know this is a lot of information, but at the same time, I hope that it's useful and helps you understand a primary theory that we'll be coming back to time and again throughout the semester, and also ways of thinking about writing in a more metacognitive way that's beyond how do I write this one particular thing. Instead, how do I learn the rules of writing in my field?